Martina Navratilova went on television and said exactly what is holding Alex back. And the thing is, she is completely right. That is where we are starting today, because this conversation matters more than the trophy Alex didn't win, and more than the ranking points she did earn, and more than any of the historical milestones that have already been written into the record books over the past 2 weeks. Those things are real and they are significant, and they deserve every word that has been written about them. But this video is about what comes next. Specifically, it is about the technical diagnosis that one of the greatest players in the history of this sport delivered live on national television, the exact words she used, and what those words actually mean when you unpack them properly, the supporting analysis that Jim Courier added about Alex's fourth-round opponent that explains precisely why that match went the way it did, and one specific detail about Alex's serve that, if she addresses it before the hard-court season begins, changes the entire conversation about what her ceiling as a player actually is. So stay with me, because this is worth working through carefully. Let's establish the baseline first, because context matters and the Wimbledon run deserves to be properly framed before we start talking about what needs to improve. Alex just completed the best Grand Slam result of her career by a significant margin. She became the first Filipino player in the Open era to reach the fourth round of a Grand Slam. She walked onto center court and beat Iga Swiatek, the world number 3, the defending Wimbledon champion, the 6-time Grand Slam winner, in straight sets. She then went 2 hours and 22 minutes in her fourth-round match against a former Grand Slam finalist and took that match to a deciding set. By any honest and objective measure, this was an extraordinary 2 weeks. And yet, the moment a player reaches this level, the question that matters most is not what you just did. It is what you need to do differently to go further. And Navratilova, who built one of the most dominant careers in the history of women's tennis on the foundation of understanding exactly what a serve can do when it functions as a genuine weapon, had a very specific answer. She said the serve is too much of a puffball. That is a direct quote. Not diplomatic. Not softened for the benefit of a young player who just had a remarkable tournament. A clear, experienced, earned assessment from someone who spent decades turning her own serve into one of the most feared weapons in the sport. So let's talk about what she actually meant, because Navratilova was not simply saying that Alex served slowly. She was identifying something more specific and considerably more important than pace alone. The first thing she pointed out is that Alex is physically capable of serving much faster than she regularly does. She can hit the ball at around 105 miles per hour. She has the height and the physical tools to generate that kind of pace consistently. But during the Paolini match, her first serve was regularly sitting in the 80 to 85 miles per hour range. That is not a power serve. That is a placement serve. It is a serve built on spin and direction rather than pace, and against certain opponents in certain situations, it can be genuinely effective. Swiatek herself actually mentioned after their match that she had difficulty handling Alex's serve, which sounds contradictory at first, a slow serve troubling one of the best returners in the world, until you understand the mechanics of what Alex does with spin and placement to compensate for the lack of pace. Against players who struggle to read heavy kick serves or who are uncomfortable with the angles that a left-handed server creates, the slower serve can disrupt rhythm in ways that matter. The problem is that Paolini is not that kind of player. Paolini is what Jim Courier described in his analysis as a maximizer. Someone who identifies the problem in front of her and finds the solution to it with the specific intelligence of a player who has been solving tennis puzzles at the highest level for years. She has exceptional footwork. She finishes points at the net when the opportunity appears. She compensates for whatever physical limitations she has through tactical precision and the ability to adapt within a match as new information becomes available. That description, a maximizer who attacks opportunities rather than waiting passively for errors, is exactly the profile of a player who punishes a soft serve most effectively. Because a soft serve is the biggest single opportunity a returner gets in professional tennis. It gives you time. It gives you a predictable contact point. It gives you the ability to set your feet and load your swing and drive the ball through the court from a position of control rather than scrambling. Paolini saw the serve pattern in the first set and then spent the rest of the match attacking every second serve opportunity she could identify. That is not Paolini being exceptional. That is Paolini being exactly the kind of maximizer that Courier described, someone who does not waste the openings they're placed in front of her. And Navratilova's point is that Alex was placing an opening in front of her on virtually every service game. But here is where Navratilova's analysis goes deeper than just the pace issue, and this is the part that I think gets the least attention despite being arguably the most significant piece of a diagnosis. She said Alex needs to change her grip and use her left-handedness more effectively. Specifically, she was hitting the majority of her serves into Paolini's forehand rather than her backhand. Think about what that means in tactical terms. A left-handed player serving to a right-handed opponent has a built-in geometric advantage on the serve that exists nowhere else in the game. The slice serve from the advantage court that jams a right-hander's backhand, pulling them off the court with an angle they simply cannot counter effectively. The delivery that exploits the natural motion of a left-handed swing to create patterns that right-handed servers cannot replicate. These are the specific tools that make left-handed servers genuinely difficult to return at the highest level, and Alex was not using them. She was serving repeatedly into Paolini's forehand side, which is Paolini's weapon, the shot she was born to attack, the contact point that she specifically wants to be hitting from when the rally begins. A tactically smart left-handed server should be making experienced right-handed opponents hit backhands under pressure, not setting up the forehand they are most comfortable with. Alex was doing the opposite of that throughout significant stretches of the Paolini match, and the Italian was collecting those serves and using them to build pressure in exactly the situations where the match was most critical. Now here is the thing about this specific diagnosis that I think is actually exciting rather than discouraging, and this is the reframe that matters most for understanding what this Wimbledon run actually means for Alex's future. Think about what she accomplished at this tournament with a serve that Navratilova is publicly calling a puffball on national television. She beat Maya Joint, who had just eliminated Serena Williams, in 3 sets with a 6-0 deciding set. She beat Iga Swiatek, the defending champion, in straight sets on center court. She pushed Jasmine Paolini, a former Grand Slam finalist, to a deciding set and competed for over 2 hours in a 4th-round Grand Slam match. She did all of that with one of her most important weapons operating well below its potential. Not slightly below its potential, significantly below. She was leaving somewhere between 20 and 25 miles per hour of available serve pace on the table in virtually every service game of the tournament. And she still beat the defending champion. That fact is worth sitting with for a moment before moving on, because it is genuinely remarkable. It means that her ground strokes and her movement and her mental game and her tactical instincts are already functioning at a level that can produce those results without her serve contributing what it should be contributing. The rest of her game has been carrying a handicap that she and her team may not have fully recognized, or may have recognized and accepted as a calculated trade-off, and she was still good enough to make the second week of Wimbledon and beat the defending champion along the way. Now imagine what happens when the serve gets fixed. Not dramatically overhauled, not reinvented from scratch, just improved in the specific ways that Navratilova identified. More pace when the situation demands it. A grip adjustment that allows the left-handed slice to create the backhand angles it should be creating. A commitment to using her left-handedness as a weapon rather than simply as a characteristic of her delivery. If those adjustments get made and get ingrained before the hard court season starts, what you end up with is a player who just reached the 4th round of Wimbledon and pushed a Grand Slam finalist to 3 sets, becoming genuinely more dangerous on a surface where the serve matters even more than it does on grass. Because here is the reality of hard courts. The ball does not slow down the way it does on clay. The bounce does not create the same kind of rhythm disruption that heavy grass court conditions can generate. Hard courts are a more direct test of serve quality than almost any other surface, because the pace and placement of the first ball determines the shape of the point in a way that is more immediate and less forgiving than on surfaces where spin and bounce play a larger equalizing role. The serve on a hard court is not just a way of starting a rally. Is a way of controlling whether the rally is a comfortable exchange or a pressurized defensive scramble from the very first shot. Alex's serve at 85 miles per hour directed consistently to her opponent's forehands does not create pressurized defensive scrambles on hard courts. It creates opportunities. And the players in the Washington draw, where the hard court season opens on the 27th of July, are not players who waste opportunities. Venus Williams is in that draw. Emma Raducanu is in that draw. Naomi Osaka, Madison Keys, Eva Jovic, Marta Kostyuk. That is a field full of players who have the experience and the tactical intelligence to identify a soft serve pattern and attack it systematically throughout a match. If Alex arrives in Washington with the same serve she brought to Wimbledon, she will face the same fundamental problem she faced against Paolini in the fourth round, because every experienced player on that hard-court field will do what Paolini did. They will see the serve sitting up, and they will attack it, and they will use those return points to build pressure in the moments that decide matches. Momentum in a tennis match is not just about who wins the points at the end. It is shaped by every service game, across every set. The game at 4-3 in the deciding set against Paolini, where the decisive break happened, where the late double fault appeared, and the unforced error followed, did not arrive in isolation. It was the product of every service game that came before it across 2.5 sets, and specifically of how much or how little pressure Alex had been able to generate on her own serve throughout. If she had been serving at 105 and slicing consistently into Paolini's backhand, the Italian's return game looks different. The pressure balance across the service game shifts. The momentum arriving at 4-3 in the third set arrives with different energy behind it. The match might not have gone differently in the end, but it might have, and the specific reason it might have is the exact thing Navratilova identified publicly. The off-season between Wimbledon and Washington is 3 weeks. That is not a long time. Is not long enough to rebuild a game from scratch or to develop an entirely new technical approach to a stroke that has been ingrained through years of competition. But 3 weeks is enough time to make targeted adjustments to specific elements of a stroke that is already fundamentally sound. Alex does not need to reinvent her serve. She needs to commit to using more of what she already has available, the pace she can already generate, the angles her left-handedness already makes possible, the grip adjustment that Navratilova identified as the key to unlocking the backhand side slice that her left-handed delivery should be producing routinely. Those are refinements, not reconstructions. And if her coaching team is having the conversation that Navratilova publicly started, which they almost certainly are because every coaching team in the sport was watching that broadcast, then the 3 weeks between Wimbledon and Washington are 3 weeks of targeted, deliberate, focused work on the specific problem that has been identified. There is something worth acknowledging about how unusual it is for this kind of public diagnosis to come from someone of Navratilova's standing and experience. She is not a journalist offering an opinion. She is arguably the greatest serve and volley player in the history of women's tennis, someone who spent her career building a game around understanding exactly what happens when a serve creates a free point rather than starting a neutral rally. When she says the serve is a puffball, she is not performing analysis for television. She is drawing on decades of embodied understanding of how serves function at the top of the sport and identifying the specific gap between what Alex's serve currently is and what it could and should be given her physical tools. And here is the framing I want to leave you with, because I think it is the most important reframe of this entire conversation. Navratilova did not go on television and say Alex cannot compete at the highest level. She did not say the Wimbledon run was a fluke built on luck and favorable draws. She did not say Paolini was simply too good. She said Alex has the physical capability to serve much better than she currently does, and that fixing this specific issue would make an already remarkable player considerably more dangerous. That is not a criticism. That is a blueprint. And blueprints from Martina Navratilova, delivered on national television with the specificity and the authority of someone who genuinely understands the technical problem being described, are not common. Most young players at this stage of their career receive general encouragement and vague suggestions about continuing to develop. Alex received a specific, actionable technical diagnosis from one of the best practitioners in the history of her sport, delivered in front of an audience large enough to ensure that her coaching team could not miss it. That is a gift, even if it arrived in the form of the word puffball. The hard-court season is 3 weeks away. The U.S. Open, where Alex won the junior title in 2022, and where the trajectory of his career could take another major step, is not far behind Washington. These are the tournaments where the next chapter of this story gets written. And the player who arrives for those tournaments, having addressed the specific gap that Navratilova identified, who arrives with a serve that uses the pace she already has available and the left-handed angles she is currently leaving unused, will not be the same player who left Wimbledon. She will be more complete, more dangerous, and considerably harder for the maximizers of the tour to read and exploit. Alex is 21 years old. She just made the 4th round of Wimbledon. The greatest serve and volley player in the history of women's tennis just gave her a specific technical roadmap for the next stage of her development. The question is not whether the ceiling exists. The question is how quickly she walks through it. The blueprint is there. The work starts now. Tell us in the comments whether you think she makes the second week of the US Open, and whether fixing the serve before Washington changes the entire picture of her hardcourt season. Because the conversation about what Alex is capable of has only just begun, and the next match, wherever it happens, is going to matter. Era of professional tennis. She reached the fourth round of a Grand Slam for the first time in her career. She beat the defending champion, Iga Swiatek, the world number 3 and 6-time Grand Slam winner, in straight sets on center court. She then pushed Jasmine Paolini, a former Grand Slam finalist and a player who had been in a Wimbledon final on that same court 2 years earlier, to a deciding set in a match that lasted 2 hours and 22 minutes. By any honest measure, this was a remarkable fortnight. It was the kind of run that changes how a player is perceived within the sport, that shifts the internal conversation in locker rooms and commentary booths and coaching circles. From this is a talented young player to watch to this is a genuine current threat who needs to be prepared for specifically. That shift happened at Wimbledon 2026, and it is not reversible.